Today we're going to be talking about conditional statements. Conditional statements are statements that are written into an if-then format. So one part is conditional or dependent upon another part. We call these two parts a hypothesis and a conclusion. The part that comes after the word if, but before the word then, is the hypothesis. Okay. And the part that comes after the word then until the end of the sentence is the conclusion. Okay. And we're going to be looking at these two pieces of information in several ways. You might notice that your if-then statement says something like, if you give a mouse a cookie, then he'll ask for a glass of milk. Okay, so it's from a fun little kid's story. It might be something more geometry related. If a ray bisects an angle, then it's called an angle bisector. Okay. Either way, we sometimes need to be able to shorten this conditional statement down. And so we're going to use the same abbreviations we were using with our logic sentences yesterday. And so for the hypothesis statement, we will represent that with a P. And for the conclusion statement, we will represent that with a Q. Okay. To represent the if-then portion, we just draw an arrow between them. And so it's saying if this first part is true, what happens, then it will lead to this second part. Okay? So let's look at some examples and see if we can identify those parts. So on here we have, for example, if you would like to speak with a representative, then press 0. If you haven't had the pleasure of calling and having to go through the whole number pushing series of things, just get ready. It's coming as you get to be adults. And so we would want to identify the hypothesis first. So we see we have our word if, and so it starts after the word if. So it'd be, you would like to speak with a representative. This is our hypothesis in red. I have underlined in red. And you're welcome to highlight these. Sometimes that's the easiest way, and make yourself a little key at the bottom for which color is which. And then we have then press 0. So the press 0 would be our conclusion. You're going to notice that we didn't underline the word if and we didn't underline the word then, because those are not part of the hypothesis or the conclusion. Okay, they're just part of the conditional statement. So this whole thing where we have if and then is called a conditional statement, and the two parts of a conditional are the hypothesis and the conclusion. Okay. So let's look at another example. On this one it says, Tamika will advance to the next round if she completes the maze in her game. So I want you to notice the word if here is in the center this time. So not all of your conditional statements are going to be in order, where the if comes first and the then comes second. Okay? So we have to be really careful when we're looking at this. So we have if, okay, she completes the maze in her game. So that's the hypothesis. So it comes after the word then, after the word if. Okay. And it's the first part, like she has to do that first before the next part can happen. That's the other way that you would know that this is the hypothesis. Okay. So if she completes the maze, then what's going to happen? Okay, well then Tamika will advance to the next round. So that's how we know that's the conclusion. Because it's what has to happen second. And you're going to notice the word then isn't in here anywhere. Okay, so that is possible also. It's still written as an if-then statement. In fact, a lot of times you're going to notice, if you'll pay attention in everyday life, we say, if you do this, blah, 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 this will happen. And we leave out the word then a lot. And so that's just part of the standard way of our English speech patterns. And so that's going to work in here also. So just kind of be on the lookout for that. So your big key is going to be the word if. Okay. You can also rearrange this hypothesis and this conclusion from our original conditional. So this would be like our original conditional. And we can create some other related conditionals. Okay? So if we rearrange things, they're still going to be using the same hypothesis and conclusions, but we're going to rearrange them and we're going to be creating some new things. And this is where your foldable that we put in your notes the other day, it's where it comes in handy. And so we're going to be talking about converse, inverse, and contrapositive. So first, let's look at a converse. Okay? So a converse is going to be a switch. Okay, that's your key word here is switch. We're going to be switching the hypothesis and the conclusion. Now for each of these related conditionals, all the ones that are on your foldable, you're going to have your original conditional. Okay, so you're going to notice here is our original conditional statement. So it says, if the space shuttle is launched, then a cloud of smoke will appear. Okay, so that's the original. We identify, we have our hypothesis here. Okay, and we have our conclusion over here. Okay, and we just want to switch them. So they're just going to trade places. And when we do that, we get the converse. So now it says, if a cloud of smoke appears, okay, then the space shuttle was launched. All right? So we swapped our hypothesis and our conclusion. And now this new one, like in our new statement, okay, this is now our hypothesis, excuse me, and this is now our conclusion. Because if a cloud of smoke appears, that's with the if, okay, then the space shuttle was launched. That's with the word then, so that's our new conclusion. So they've swapped places and they've swapped jobs, okay? So it's really helpful if you label your original, okay? And then that will help you make sure you get them in the right spot. And you know how when we started writing down our conditionals, I said that you could write it if P then Q, and we wrote it as P and then an arrow and then a Q, right? So we're going to do something similar here when we're talking about the converse. And you can find this in your book on page 109 if you need to find it later. Okay. So we are switching those around. So we switch them so it says if Q, then P. So this is our shorthand way of writing our converse. Okay, because we've switched our P and our Q around. Okay. So next, we're going to be looking at inverse. For an inverse, we are negating the hypothesis and the conclusion. And remember, negate means that we are adding the word not, okay, or we're changing the meaning of this. And so we use the tilde to represent not, okay, and we talked about that with our logic sentences. And again, we still have to have an original conditional. Okay, there's always got to be a starting point. That's a conditional statement. So our original conditional says, if you grew up in Alaska, then you have seen snow. So we want to add not into both the hypothesis and the conclusion. You can't just add it into one. It's got to be into both. And so we want to say, if you did not grow up in Alaska, then you have not seen snow. And you notice we have to have these little helping verbs here, and so that's fine. The big key is we're changing the meaning of that statement to the opposite, okay? And you'll notice that we have added the word not into both of these, not just one of them. And so this is our converse. If you did not grow up in Alaska, then you have not seen snow. Okay? So that's going to be really helpful. And then again, we have our nice little shorthand way of writing this. Is going to be not P, then not Q. Because we added the not for both of these. Okay? And last is contrapositive. And on this one, we are going to both switch and negate the hypothesis and the conclusion. So again, we're starting with our conditional, because you always have to have the original conditional. And this one says, if 10 is an even number, then 10 is divisible by 2. Okay? So we have our hypothesis and our conclusion. And so we are going to switch them. Okay? And we are going to be adding the word not in here. So we're going to say is not divisible and is not an even number. Okay? And when we do that, we get our converse down here at the bottom. If 10 is not divisible by 2, then 10 is not an even number. So you'll notice they have been switched, and we've added not to both parts.
Mabry Strouch, please come to the office. Mabry Strouch.
Is not Q, then not P. Okay, so you'll notice we switched, and we added the little tilde for the not in front of both of them. Okay, so this is our shorthand here, and I hope that you enjoyed this, and I will see you tomorrow in class. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful afternoon.